United in AI, we learn and lead, ensuring we always stay ahead. February 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. To support the Ukrainian tech sector, the largest AI community in Ukraine, AI House, brought together global AI experts for a charitable education project, AI for Ukraine, lectures and workshops about the latest in AI and ML in exchange for donations to Ukrainian defenders. This time, AI House teams up with one of the most powerful Ukrainian AI ML tech companies, Roosh, for AI for Ukraine Season 2, to assist Ukrainian AI talents in expanding their network, equipping them with the most current and relevant knowledge in AI and ML, and raising funds to support Ukraine. Join AI for Ukraine Season 2. Harness the opportunity to learn, network, donate, and support Ukraine.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the last lecture of this year of AI for Ukraine project. My name is Maria. I'm moderator of this session and a data scientist on my own. I currently work at Lyft, a rideshare company. And to start, let me share with you about the project. AI for Ukraine is a charitable initiative created by AI House. We have two big purposes for this project. First one is so that you can access the most current knowledge, encourage collaboration, that we can share experience with international community. And another purpose is that we can raise funds to support Ukrainian defenders. Today, as always, we are gathering funds for reactive post. You can donate via the QR code on my left or via the link in the description. It's very important to keep donating. There are no small amounts, and the funds will immediately go to the needs of defenders. We will have a question and answer session after the lectures, but don't forget to write your questions during the lecture so we can triage them better and prioritize more interesting ones. Also, if you liked someone's question, please let us know by putting +1 or some other note so we can select what's more relevant to the community. So today we have very important guest to me. She's my personal friend, actually, Sophie. I had the privilege to work with her at Stripe. She joined a few months before me, and she was my onboarding buddy. And she always inspired me and motivated me by her ability to tackle something really complex and find something important inside. And it includes prioritization. It includes breaking up bigger problem into smaller problems. She was just like able to work on multiple projects and be productive and amazing in each of them. Not only we worked together, we actually lived together at some point. I moved to Ireland for the job, and then in a few weeks, COVID hit, pandemic hit us. So we were sent to work from home, and I had like a privilege to stay with Sophie in a town of Clarny. Once the war is over and we all can travel, I totally recommend you visiting the town. It's so sweet and so beautiful, like my favorite town in Ireland. And yeah, and every morning we woke up, we took our coffees and we went to the park nearby. And I don't remember anything about the time except of how kind you are and how supportive you are. And it was just so important for me back then. So yeah, thank you, Sophie, again. How are
Oh,
you?
stop. I'm great. I feel like I have such fond lockdown memories too. Like, I don't know, were we in a bubble, but we had the greatest time. Like daily walks and hikes and coffee trips and our little home office. It was really fun.
Yeah, and have you still are you still visiting those herds of deers or not really?
Yes. Yeah, I'm in the national park quite a lot, walking my dogs. But yeah, very nice area of Ireland. Definitely welcome visitors.
Yeah, this is yeah. I actually I need to visit Ireland again. Yes, Sophie. So before we dive into the lecture, firstly, can anyone write maybe some COVID stories from their experience? Because it's been a while, and now we have like work to worry about. But it was still crazy. So it requires recognition. And yeah, and Sophie, can you maybe tell us a few words? Like, what's your favorite AI technology?
Oh, I mean, I feel like spoiler alert, but it's definitely going to be large language models. I use ChatGPT daily for both my work and just like personal things too. I feel like it's my little sidekick that I can't give up in the moment. But yeah, I use it for like work. I helps with code, writing emails. Even just today, I had to like send an email on my personal thing. I'm like organizing some like payments, and I had like a blob of really messy audit data, and I just used GPT to clean it up and write the email back. So I think small things like that, it's like a daily crutch for me. So that's definitely my favorite tech advancement of recent years.
Yeah, it's so cool that we have it now. I'm actually
Mhm.
excited for it. Yeah, so on that, I will pass it over to you and let's get
Mhm.
started.
Cool. Ria gave me such a nice introduction, but the TLDR is that I am a data scientist at Stripe, and I joined Stripe about 4.5 years ago. And since then, I've been working on a lot of different projects. But more recently, I've really gotten deep in the Stripe support space, which is really, really fun for me because I love NLP and support is just full of text. So I'm really enjoying working in this space. And today I'm going to talk about some of the lessons that we learned while shipping Stripe's first application of large language modeling for our support space. So we started working on this, well over a year and a half ago now, and it was pre-chat GPT. So LLMs still weren't super prevalent or their power wasn't widely known at the time. So our team was extremely lightweight. And it was very much just like a spin up team where we could try building a proof of concept model to see how feasible this could be. And things were very, very scrappy. We've since like scaled up the team so that we're a lot more production friendly. But the talk I'm going to give today describes the journey from zero to getting there. And my goal today is that the next time any of you guys are solving a business problem using language modeling, these lessons will be top of mind and you guys will be better equipped from day one for that end measurable success. So, ideally, my past headaches and woes can serve as good warnings or tips for you guys to avoid some of these gotchas when working with LLMs. So, definitely going to start with some brief context on Stripe. Stripe is a payments company offering many different payments related products. So, millions of companies from some of the world's largest enterprises like Google or Amazon to brand new startups use Stripe to accept payments, grow their revenue, and accelerate their businesses. Stripe is available to businesses in nearly 50 countries, and our users can accept payments from customers in about 200 countries. So, as you can imagine, having such a large global customer base and a wide suite of products means that our support operations org is extremely busy all of the time. Every week, our agents handle tens of thousands of support cases where they answer questions and solve problems for our customers. And as I mentioned before, the majority of support volume is text based data. So LLMs are an especially exciting opportunity for support. There are many applications where this type of machine learning can add value, maybe summarizing our support case tickets, translating answers between different languages so that we can offer faster global support, retrieving relevant information from our documentation, maybe classifying what issues our users support cases are about so that we can make, improvements to our onboarding flow if that's where there's friction. Also, we could use this type of ML to just understand if our users are happy or disappointed based on the sentiment of their emails or chats. However, for our first undertaking, we decided to really jump in at the deep end and target the root of the support problem space, which is the very complex but high value task of answering our users' questions. So our ultimate goal here is to help the agents solve cases more efficiently by prompting relevant responses to users' questions using GPT. So we were very adamant that our customers will always talk directly to support agents. We want to just prompt these agents with the relevant responses so that they no longer have to spend time doing research or diagnosing the issues to look up the user's answers, which can be really, really time consuming given how complex and wide ranging the support problem space is. And for our success here, we needed to make sure that our ML prompted responses were first and foremost information accurate. It was really important to us that we were always providing agents with concrete answers that they could trust. And the second criteria was that we always hit the right Stripe tone. So the human experience is extremely important to us, and we definitely don't want our agents to ever sound like bots. Ultimately, our most important measure of success is that these agents are then using our tool and it's helping them solve cases more efficiently. So the first lesson that we learned is that LLMs are not oracles. And I preface this with yet. I feel like there's so much progress in this space that hopefully this slide will be out of date very soon. But as of today, I feel like lots and lots of very valid hype about LLMs. But when it comes to very context-heavy business problems, LLMs still have some important limitations, and they can be really, really subtle. So if we take, for example, a very common question that our support agents get asked every single day, which is, how do I pause payouts? So the correct solution to pausing payouts at Stripe that our agents will give you is to update your payout schedule to manual, which I appreciate is not super obvious. So when we ask out of box GPT 3.5, how can a Stripe customer pause payouts? And we give it the correct prompt prelude so it knows to emulate a support agent. GPT gives a very plausible sounding answer, but unfortunately, it's factually incorrect. Like there is no payouts button on a Stripe dashboard. Now, when we upgrade to using GPT-4, so a more advanced engine, the answer does get a lot better. Like GPT-4 knows that the trick to pause payouts is to swap to manual payouts. However, the model goes a little off track discussing disputes, and the information isn't entirely factually correct. So overall, advancing the GPT engine does improve the answer quality, but there's still limitations of what this general purpose model can do, and we know to expect hallucinations. So this was just a very, very simple one question example, but this trend does hold true for the majority of questions that Stripe customers ask. And that's because the materials that GPT has been pre-trained on or are either out of date, perhaps they're incomplete, or maybe GPT is confusing Stripe related instructions with instructions that relate to other payments companies. So we can definitely improve this answer by prompt engineering. However, that's not a simple task when we have hundreds of different topics Stripe users ask questions about every day. So to solve this problem, and remembering that for our proof of concept solution, we really were optimizing for precision, our priority was to provide factually correct answers to agents. We found that to guarantee that precision or control, we really needed to break down the problem into more tangible ML steps. So first, we need to identify whether the user is asking a valid question or not. So this step will remove any chit chat or questions that don't have clear enough context. For example, if a user writes to us and says, hey, what's the weather like? Or maybe something vague like, hey, when will it be fixed? Something like that. We want to filter out that noisy question and only progress questions that are actually answerable by a model. So once we pass the first step, the next stage is to identify what the topic this question relates to. Thirdly, using that topic relevant context, we can generate the answer to the question. And then finally, we modify the answer so that it meets that perfect Stripe tone, which means that the response has the right friendly but succinct tone that our agents target. So when we look at the architecture here, our end solution consists of a sequential GPT framework. And at the beginning, we relied really heavily on GPT fine-tuning on labeled data sets to make sure that we were hitting that precision that we wanted. So the first fine-tuned trigger classification model filters out any of that candidate user questions that are not suitable. Any relevant questions pass through to our fine-tuned topic classifier, which identifies what support material or documentation is relevant to answer that question. And using this information as context, our third fine-tuned model generates that information accurate response. Finally, our last few-shot model adjusts the answers to meet Stripe tone before being prompted to the agents. And we found many benefits here, the main one being that we have a lot more control over our solution framework, and we can expect a lot more reliable and interpretable results thanks to fine-tuning. And in our case, because we added a lot of thresholds to these classifiers, we completely mitigated hallucinations. The other great benefit here is that fine-tuning on GPT requires, much fewer labels compared to traditional machine learning models. In our case, we found that we could move pretty quickly with just about 500 labels. So we relied exclusively on expert annotations, or we'd annotated ourselves, so that we can move quickly and train these models. So the second lesson that I'm going to talk about today is how important it is to prioritize online feedback and monitoring. So during development, we relied on backtest evaluations to measure ML performance. For our classification models, this was really standard practice using labeled data sets, for example, precision, recall, etc., based on the classes we were trying to predict. For our generative models, we engaged with expert agents who manually reviewed and labeled responses so that we could get quantitative results. We also engaged with these agents for user testing and training data collection so that they could dictate exactly what the ML response prompts should be for different types of input questions. After many ML iterations, our offline feedback trended really well, and we got to the state where we were confident that our ML accuracy and Stripe tone were at target and we were ready to ship to production. For our production setup, we designed a controlled experiment to measure the effect of cases where agents are prompted with ML generated responses versus those which aren't. So we actually had a lot of constraints in how we could set this experiment up. And that was because the volume of support cases eligible for our ML answers was relatively small, because we scoped the topic of questions that we were fine-tuning on to be small so that we could, iterate quickly. And that meant that we couldn't exactly, ring fence what agents were in the control versus treatment. We had to randomize by the support case. So thousands of agents were included in the experiment, but the majority of cases that they were working on wouldn't get these ML prompts. And the second big gotcha here was that because online case labeling was not feasible at this scale in production, we had a considerable gap when it came to observing online accuracy trends. So once we shipped, we had a big surprise. We realized that the rate at which agents were using our ML generated prompts was much lower than expected. And this was a huge shock to us because, we had received lots of positive feedback from the agents during the user testing. And we also had a lot of confidence that our models were accurate thanks to our offline evaluations on labeled data sets. The reality was that very few cases were actually using our ML generated answers. And because we didn't have visibility into online accuracy trends, we were pretty in the dark trying to understand what was going on and whether there was some discrepancy between our online performance not meeting the high bar that our offline performance metrics were telling us. So In the absence of online accuracy metrics, we developed a heuristic-based match rate to represent how often our ML-generated responses matched the responses that agents actually sent to the users. So when we prompted an agent with an ML response, regardless of whether they used it or not, let's check how similar the answer that they typed out to the user was to what we suggested. And if they were very, very similar, let's consider that a positive match. And this match rate was, a really, really crude lower bound measure on our expected accuracy. But it helped us tell how the model was trending. And we could use our backtest evaluations to make sure that the accuracy match rate trends were stable. And what we were looking for here was if there was any dip. Like if our match rate suddenly changed from our offline performance to our online performance, then we would know that the model was somehow broken or not working as expected. But because our match rate was stable, that told us that, actually our accuracy is pretty good. So, or pretty good in that it matched our targets. So even though our offline user testing was really, really positive, and now our match rate confirmed that our accuracy trends were stable and consistent with our offline evaluations, we realized that in practice, agents were just too accustomed to their flow of solving cases and completely ignoring our prompts. So we had thousands of agents using ML, or thousands of agents using our ML prompts in our experiment or being suggested to them. But unfortunately, they weren't seeing them often enough that they were actually changing their behavior and using this new tool. They were extremely busy agents and just solving cases as quickly as they could in their usual workflows. The TLDR here is that lack of agent engagement was this huge bottleneck for us. And we really needed a much larger UX and agent training effort if we wanted to increase adoption and actually materialize any efficiency gains from prompting agent answers with the questions. So many big learnings here from this experiment. The first one is to always ask yourself whether human behavior can affect solving your business problem. And if so, engage with the UX team really, really early on. More practically for ML, we also learned the importance of deriving proxy online metrics in cases where we don't have the right data to measure accuracy exactly. So directional feedback using heuristics is a million times better than being completely in the dark or relying exclusively on manual spot checks that just won't give you the volume that you need. We also learned to ship each stage of the framework in shadow mode as soon as you're ready, besides waiting for one large end-to-end ship. That way you can debug as you go and validate functionality and target expectations per stage sequentially. So right now, every time we're building a new model, I work with an engineer at the exact same time so that we can ship the model into shadow mode and just inspect the volume charts to make sure that we're meeting our expectations. Finally, this experience really taught us to prioritize monitoring efforts just as highly as other ML development tasks. Often monitoring is compromised as, something that we can catch up on after we've shipped the model to prod. And this is especially easy to do when you're working on a lightweight resource constrained group like we were. But our lesson learned here is that a model is definitely not shipped unless it has full monitoring and dashboard and targets set, because that online feedback really is key to ensuring we're actually solving the user problem we're targeting. So the last lesson that I'm going to talk about today is how data is still the most important player when solving business problems using LLMs. So LLMs are really not a silver bullet. The production requires, data collection, testing, experimentation, infrastructure, etc., just like any other model. And that age-old, 80-20 rule for working in data science really does hold true. So writing the code for our proof of concept LLM framework took like days, maybe weeks, whereas iterating on the data set to train each of these models, evaluate them, set up the experiment, etc., that took months. And I've definitely spent a lot more time in Google Sheets reviewing or annotating data compared to the time I spent writing Python code. We also found in our experience that iterating on the label data quality yielded much higher performance gains compared to using more advanced GPT engines. So the types of ML errors we're seeing related to gotchas in the Stripe support space, as opposed to more general gaps in language understanding. Really just improving the data quality or iterating on the prompt solve the problem, and we didn't actually need to use the latest GPT engine. We've also seen that scaling became much more of a data management effort, which made it really obvious to us that we needed to change up our LLM architecture for version 2 of this model. We actually found that collecting labels for the fine-tuning models, like our topic classifier and our generative agent response model, added a lot of complexity and became a bottleneck for scaling. So for our second iteration of the solution, we actually deprecated these models and really adopted a more straightforward retrieval augmented generation approach. So we swapped out the fine-tune topic classifier for an unsupervised embedding search model that uses our oracle of either label data or else just the entirety of Stripe support documentation to identify the most relevant context to answer users' question. So instead of just, tell me what topic this question relates to, we're asking what's the most relevant support material from either our docs or our labeled canned responses does this question relate to? And if this question relates to, a canned response, great, let's just show that answer to the user. And if we don't have a canned response, let's use the most relevant support material as context for a zero-shot generative model. And this is the more typical retrieval augmented generation step. So when we're using embedding search as a canned response classifier, we're really optimizing for questions that we know the exact precise answer for. Whereas for the generative answers, we're more optimizing for recall. So we can change how or when we apply these answers in the user's support experience, depending how important it is to be correct at that certain time. Also now, because we're either doing canned responses or a zero-shot generative model, we don't have the need for the Stripe tone model anymore because it's built in. So moving away from fine-tuning and towards unsupervised learning, or RAG, is so that we no longer have this big bottleneck for label data acquisition. It also gives us the opportunity to optimize for either precision or recall, like I mentioned before, depending on where our user is in the support funnel. So if the user is talking to an agent and we want to help the agent solve the case, we really need to make sure that we're hitting a high precision target of, maybe 99%. And maybe we're relying exclusively on our labeled canned responses to do this. However, if the user is just browsing our website and they haven't yet started talking to an agent, we can probably give them like a good enough instant ML generated answer that optimizes for recall, as we can always encourage the user to contact a human agent if they're still stuck. So what started as a tool for agents can also be integrated to talk directly with our users, where the right quality targets depend on the end user experience needed for that application. We found that the quality of the system's performance is a direct function of our Oracle data. So Stripe support space changes over time as we advance or grow our product suite. And we need to make sure that our Oracle of documentation or canned response labels stay fresh so that our model is continuously up to date and providing accurate responses. And I'm currently thinking about ways that we can, measure or monitor this online. So using some sort of metrics that quantify whether certain support material or canned responses is or is not adding value. And if it's not adding value, maybe we need to refresh it. So if anyone has any ideas on how we might be able to do this programmatically, let's chat after this. To recap today, the goal of this project is ultimately to help answer our users' questions, optimizing for both efficiency and user experience. We started with a proof of concept, but are now building a single model that can solve multiple question answering applications for both our agents and our users. The three big lessons from this talk are, firstly, LLMs are not oracles. Definitely break down your business problems into ML manageable steps. Secondly, online feedback really is key, so monitoring is a priority just as much as any other ML development task. And lastly, data is king. So more often than not, your data strategy will dictate your ML architecture, especially for solving business problems that require deep domain expertise at scale. So I'm finished. Hopefully that was interesting, but please let me know if anyone has any questions.
Thank you so much for the lecture. It was a pleasure to hear from someone like working that close with LLMs, and also like there have been an article from OpenAI back in March that you guys were one of the first clients of OpenAI. Yeah, it's a public information. I checked it before.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's super.
how was it to be first?
I mean, it was really exciting. I feel like Stripe is definitely an ML first company. Like they really encourage us taking on latest trends. So the partnership was super close. Like chatted with them. There's also a lot of folks in Microsoft Azure's OpenAI service who were like phenomenal that we worked really, really closely with on solving this problem. So I feel like what I loved about the early stage adoption of these is that the community is quite small. Like it's still quite small today, but I feel like everybody's really, really friendly and like very accessible and generous with your time. So if you ping somebody and say, "Hey, I'm trying to do this, like I'm stuck. Let's jump on a call and like chat about it." Like that's very, very common. Because we're all learning as we go. So from my experience anyways, companies have been like really great to partner in these areas and knowledge share.
This is good to hear. Before we dive into discussion, I want to remind that it's really crucial to support our defenders. We are here, those of us who are in Ukraine, because of them. And please donate by scanning QR code or using the link in the description. And yeah, we have some questions. So let's start from Olivia. Any advices for individuals who are just starting to explore the possibilities of LLMs in their work?
That's a great question. I think it's always easier to work backwards from the problem. So like if you have a really well clear problem, it's easier to work backwards and see. Although I find that like at Stripe, sometimes when you have such a like a great tool, maybe it's better to just be like, hey, we have this hammer, like what possibly could we do? So hackathons are a really great way to ideate. Once you have some ideas ready though, my advice is to use ChatGPT, throw together some prompts, just like I had in my slides. Like I think sometimes that's the best place to start and get a feel for how feasible or useful the raw GPT output could be. And if you have something there that you could work with, I would say get it live as quickly as you can. Like start using it to see if it's productive. One of the lessons that I didn't talk about here directly, but because we were first at Stripe doing this, like actually getting to production was really, really hard because it was like this new infrastructure. Whereas now at Stripe, our team is a lot more mature. So if we have, idea for an LLM today, we can probably ship it tomorrow. So somehow accelerating that, um, like velocity to shipping makes it a lot easier to experiment and like move quickly and try many different solutions or problems even to solve. So I think for like very direct tips, be clear on what problem you're trying to solve. If you're just ideating, like list all of them and try and go from problem statement to what would be a measurable success here. Then start with like prompt engineering, just using OpenAI's GPT interface or Azure, whichever you have access to. And I would say be regimented on like, is this good? Is this bad? How will you measure that success? And see then if it's something that you could get to production or use in real life to see if it solves your problem.
If you had a possibility now to do something, what would you do with or outside Stripe?
That's a great question. I love the problem. I feel like I'm very lucky because I really genuinely love the problems that we're working on at Stripe. I feel like the next big thing is having some sort of assistant that you can communicate with that will like take actions for you or digest your like needs and like give you detailed, accurate updates. Like I could imagine this for real life too. Like I would love to have some sort of application on my phone where I could just be like, oh, like how busy am I next week? And then it would digest my calendar, look at my WhatsApps or something like that and be like, oh, you're free Thursday. Maybe you should go to the cinema. You know, I wanted to be able to do stuff like that and then be like, okay, I'll message Maria and see if she's free for me. Like I wanted to just be my assistant. So I
I
think
would
that's
love
pretty
as
cool.
well.
Yeah, I feel like we're not that far off. Like it feels like a solvable problem.
You see, Olivia, here is a hint for you. What can you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, next question. We have two questions from Alexander, both about Stripe itself. So let's start from
Mhm.
second. It's shorter. Does Stripe use some libraries like LangChain or similar to do all prompts engineering and chains manually?
Yes, I think we do have LangChain at Stripe. I don't know exactly. I like I said before, Stripe's pretty open. So if there's new technology or new libraries, like we're gonna try them and see how it goes. And I know that LangChain is used at Stripe. Personally, I haven't used it enough. I need to try using it more. But
And second question from Alexander, when Stripe will be available in Ukraine?
that's a great question. I'm far from the sales team. I need to like get an update from them and try and promote this, accelerate this.
Just know that you guys are very welcomed here. We are very startup driven, like we want to have it one day. So yeah,
Yeah.
wherever it comes. So next question from Volodymyr. Strange question, but is there any possibility to deploy small language models on mobile devices?
I think this does exist. I haven't used it, but I remember people talking about it. I can't remember any details, but I need to look this up. I think I remember people saying that you could do this because like a lot of the um, like uncertainty or fear related to language models is that you're giving away access to all of your data. So if I had a language model on my phone and I was prompting it to, you know, look through my call history or something like that, then I would be exposing the information, which obviously as like a large company, there is ramifications for. So I think that there are some sort of localized models that you can use. Like you can definitely deploy your own model. Like there's lots of open source large language models now that are like competitive. Um, so I don't know the exact answer, but I think this is possible.
Which one is your favorite other model, like not OpenAI?
Oh, yeah, I've been using Claude from Anthropic, and it's super interesting. Like I was saying about how like open the community is, I was like chatting with some of the engineers from Claude last week, and the differences between the models is so interesting. Like I think with GPT, it's kind like there's obviously like prompt guidances, and how to get the most from your prompt. With Claude, they have very specific ones. Like for example, you have to use XML tags because Claude was trained on XML. So like you know, it's not like a hard rule. Obviously, you can try it, but it's not going to yield as performant results. And they have different formatting guidelines. So yeah, it's very interesting. I feel like if I had more time, I would do like a benchmark against all and see. I know that there are large scale benchmarks, but I mostly care about my specific problem space. So I want to know if like there is some limitations or which one is most useful.
Well,
But so far, I found that like they're pretty comparable.
wow, haven't seen them yet. Maybe it's a good time for me to check it after the
Yeah,
call.
yeah.
Okay, next question. What was the main reason for switching to the RAG approach instead of putting all available support
Yeah,
agents in the prompt?
yeah. It's just the size. Like we don't have like I feel like there is like actually Claude has like 200K token max size, which is huge, but the support space is just far too large, that we couldn't possibly put it in a prompt. We've also found, like I don't have quantitative data to feel this, but from my spot checking, I did find that sometimes when you overpopulate the prompt, sometimes it gets a bit noisy, especially for these like very specific questions. An example of this would be like if you're asking, how do I change payouts in Brazil? And then I populate the prompt with loads of information about all these different geos, like it's going to get a bit confusing. Whereas I think if you can actually preserve the prompt to be relevant information only, you'll do more accurate or higher quality generated answers. Um, so long story short, yes, we have to do some sort of filtering or dynamic context generation based on context.
Mhm. Okay, next question will be from those we've pre-selected for this talk,
Oh,
from like people who couldn't come. What was the weirdest or craziest answer you've seen by ChatGPT that was like hallucinations or correct or helpful?
Actually, this one's easy. It came to mind because we were working on this like a long time ago. And I was constantly testing questions. And I remember one time I was asking a question about payouts. And I think this is hilarious because it does sound pretty plausible. But the model responded saying that Stripe would pay you out by sending a check in the post. And I just thought that was so funny because like that's a prime example of like something that could kind of go wrong. Like it's hilarious, but like it could be really annoying for the user. And obviously Stripe do not provide checks in the post. So I think that was funny because it was like subtle but kind of ridiculous also.
Oh, but this is so American in a way,
Yeah.
checks, yeah. So I worked with alternative payment methods when I were in back then. We supported checks as incoming payment
Yeah.
payout. So yeah, I understand how it arrived to this, but yeah, this is so funny. Okay, next question is actually kind of similar to the first question, but a bit broader. Which advice would you give to someone at the beginning of their career as a data scientist so they can stay relevant in the developing world?
That's such a good question. And I think it's relevant for everyone because I would say like when I was starting off in my career, I was pretty deliberate with my upskilling plan because sometimes I do this too. I can be like, yeah, I'm going to upskill and I'll spend, a few hours a week reading or doing courses, but because I'm not tracking it or I don't have like an end clear goal, it kind of feels like you're not making large progress or it's harder to feel energized by a progress. Whereas when you set out a clear plan and then at the end of it being like, yes, I wanted to complete this course, I did it. Like that box is ticked, or like I read these books ticked. I feel like it's a lot more rewarding and it keeps you more disciplined to not, bail or get too busy and uh, lose commitment to some of the learning tasks. So I would say be very deliberate, but probably more importantly, I would like seek a mentor if you can. I had a mentor in my first job, and I feel like that was like leaps and bounds the biggest accelerator to my career early stage development. Um, and why I mean that this applies to everyone, I think like it still applies to me now. I was doing my like 2024 planning and I was like, where do I want to develop? And I literally have a document where I've outlined the resources that I want to upskill on. And I also outlined the people who I think would be excellent mentors and that I could learn from. So I feel like this is probably more important as you're earlier in your career tenure, but it's lifelong.
Any book or course you can recommend?
Yeah, I'll share my resources if that helps. I'm really deep in the LLM space, so I have a bunch of papers that I want to learn. There's some deep learning books that are coming out that are really good. I have recommendations from colleagues. I haven't found a good course yet, but I think I haven't done enough of scouring or looking. So right now I'm looking at books. Actually, I think I could easily
Or
find the
maybe
name of them.
papers that impressed you in a way or wasn't expecting?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like off the top of my head, I definitely couldn't reference a paper that
So
I
that's
read
fine.
recently.
No
Yeah.
problem here. We are, yeah.
Um, yeah. Um, oh, okay. Let me find the books afterwards.
Yeah, we promise to share it to people
Oh,
after.
yes. I see one, Deep Learning Foundations and Concepts 2024 by Bishop.
So
And another one,
this is one you
yeah.
recommend.
Yes, one of my colleagues who's excellent recommended these books and also Understanding Deep Learning by Prince.
Mhm.
I can actually link them in the chat possibly. So I have these in my Amazon cart that I'm gonna
Thank you so much.
take a look at. Yeah. But I think one of the lessons that I had from when I was upskilling is that sometimes I would waste a lot of time trying to find the best book or the best paper or the best Coursera course. They're all good. Like I think taking one, I'm definitely a person who writes notes or like I need to apply whatever I'm learning kind of immediately. or else it just kind of sifts out. So I think take anything, maybe time block, and just make sure you're challenging yourself to actually like actively learn, because sometimes it can be too easy to just read and then I don't know, I definitely forget what I've read like a half an hour later unless I'm pretty engaged.
And make sure you implement it. Learning is part of the
Yeah.
job. Actually doing it is more important.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
back to questions. Isn't the GPT-4 API more expensive than a human agent? If no, what was the percentage of Stripe saving with this?
I just copied some of my learnings from my documents. Is GPT-4 API more expensive than a human agent? No, our agents are like experts. So they're like highly skilled, trained people that GPT-4 is still like extremely cost effective if we can speed them up. And what does the percentage does Stripe save with an LLM tech? That's hard to measure. I don't have a percentage. I don't think we have this measured. Typically, we would take it from like how many users' questions can we deflect by answering them more quickly, or like can we help speed up the agent? But there's not really a comparable like GPT-4 agent versus human dollar amount that in our minds. We do like I think in our
That would be
model
easier.
development though.
Maybe it will be easier to estimate it based on time spent per ticket.
Yeah, and even then it gets quite tricky, but that is a good application. One thing that we do, I think, as we're in this like proof of concept to like fully fledged production model, I think earlier on the stage we're kind of like, can we solve it? Like, is it good enough? And then afterwards we're like, oh my God, look at the like actual cost efficiency of these API calls. Like, can we make it more efficient? What's the actual cost of serving this model? So I think initially it's like an emphasis on quality and then an emphasis on like ML efficiency.
Okay. Yeah, I just remember from my times that it take like half an hour to agent to support a ticket. That's a lot of time, actually.
Yeah.
And also like it limits how much ticket you can solve a day, and volume is huge.
Yeah, and often like I think there is like a spectrum of questions that get asked. There are lots of questions that like are probably Googleable, like the documentation should like solve this for you. But there's also a lot of questions where like you need hands-on support that an agent will always need to diagnose and take actions for. So I think there's like discrepancy there on the cost per case based on the context.
Yeah. Okay, next question. LLMs had significant attention in recent years. From your perspective, which potential challenges should organizations be aware of when considering their adoption of solving business problems?
I think it depends on the actual problem. Like in our case, in support, I feel like we're trading off like efficiency, like solving agents answers quickly, with the actual experience. Like I mentioned, human interaction is extremely important to us. So that's the trade-offs that I'm personally optimizing for or balancing. And I think that would be the case. Like I'd imagine whatever your business problem is, you'll have similar outlook. Like for example, if you were on like a sales team and you want to automate outreach marketing emails, there's probably a balance of like, okay, automating using LLMs means that you can contact like hundreds of thousands of users, but maybe it's going to be very obviously spam compared to a human generated email. So like, how will you balance that? You probably still could automate it, but there might be trade-offs on like response rates. I think in like a more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like taking a step back as an organization looks for LLMs, understanding like privacy is important, making sure that you're like sensible with the information that you're sharing and that you have like clearance to share certain information is important too.
Okay, question from Irina. Hi, Sophie. Did you try to build your own models? Did you use open LLMs to compare results?
I haven't trained my own LLM model, but some of my teammates have, which I think is really cool. We have I feel like in my experience, I've definitely started with GPT engines. Like I said, optimizing for like, can we just solve this problem? But then once we know that we can, to make it more efficient, I've downgraded the model and started using some open source models. Like I think GPT is great for accelerating ML to solve the problem, or even just as data collection. But then you could probably downgrade and use like a more simple BERT model once you've collected enough GPT annotations. So I feel like based on the problem itself, like if it is more of simple classification, I think more traditional ML models will be competitive with GPT. But for some of the more complex, heavy, tasks like answer generation or text generation, GPT has muscle there. Or any large language model has muscle there that would be hard to build your own.
Yeah. I never tried. I don't want to. Like I'm not
There's,
doing.
yeah. I think there's a few like Claude, Anthropic, or OpenAI's GPT. I think Hugging Face has access to large language models that you can train. Like they're smaller, but I've definitely used them for classification tasks. But for some of the more advanced ones, we're still in the like feasibility stage, so I haven't looked at more deliberate benchmarks.
Yeah. Okay, next question. When you firstly implemented it, were you transparent to final customers that your agents have this help? Yeah, and as a sub question, what were the behaviors of the metrics for satisfaction? Was the answer?
Oh, great question. Yeah. So first question, transparency with users. When we have agent supervision, like agents in the loop, we actually didn't, but that's because the agents were kind of gatekeeping. Like we would give them the answer. They had full control over what they were changing it. They were only encouraged to send the answer once they had confidence. So from our offline evaluations, it didn't change any behavior. And then also from our online experimentation, we monitored the user experience metrics and we saw that it wasn't changing any behavior. So we didn't feel the need. However, in other applications where we are directly user facing, we are like extremely, what's the word I'm looking for? Like loud, and we'll tell you that this is AI. So we definitely are transparent when there's not a human in the loop acting as your like main communicator, because we think it's important. Like I think personally as well, if I was working on any customer support ticket, like if I was contacting anybody, if it's a bot, I'm like really tolerable with that if I know it's a bot. And if they give me kind of rubbish answers, I'm like, that's okay. Like it's trying, it's quick, I feel like that's like really acceptable. Whereas if you're talking to what you think is a human and then it turns out it's a bot, it's so frustrating. Like I definitely get pissed off if I just want an answer and it's giving me nonsense. Even if the human was giving me nonsense, I'd be totally fine with that. I'd be like, oh, like it's probably a hard problem to solve. Whereas when I know it's an AI bot, I feel like I suddenly just, yeah, have different standards. So we're very transparent when it's AI in control. And I can't remember what the second question was. Oh, we are customer satisfaction metrics. Yeah. So whenever we do any type of online experiment, we always monitor like our direct like North Star business metrics, and we equally prioritize the customer satisfaction because like user experience is a priority for us. And we're mainly hoping here for like no change or like improved user experience. But if we were to see harm in there, then obviously we would retaliate or like stop and remediate.
So it didn't change or it improved actually? Or it's
And this, it did not change. Yeah.
Well, it's not bad,
No, exactly. Yeah. I think it's also a pretty volatile metric because the percentage of users who return CSATs is pretty low. So the volume therefore is pretty low. So it's hard to move that needle.
Yeah, and typically people who return satisfaction score are either super happy or super unhappy.
Yeah.
So very not objective metric.
Yeah.
Okay, and maybe the last question for today. This is actually from me, and I keep asking it every guest because I just want to know the answer. Isn't it like suspicious to you how well LLMs are performing? Because at the end, it's just like very complex Markov chain, and I find it, a bit suspicious that it's so well. And yeah,
I don't know if I'm suspicious. I think I'm like impressed. I don't know if I just have like a very oversimplified mental model for how these models work. I think it's super impressive, the like scale of them. But I have no problem like justifying the results because its input is like all text information that's available. So in my mind, when it gives you incredibly impressive answers or very human-like answers, I'm like, yeah, of course it does, because it knows exactly how humans communicate. So I don't know if I'm like extremely simplifying it, but I'm no longer surprised when it gives amazing answers. But I do think it's like extremely impressive. Like I'm still in awe of like the human achievement that they built this and like the scale of it.
Yeah, I
And
guess
I'm like
impressive is a better word.
confident.
It's more what I meant. Like, because for me, it also means that the way I think and the way I talk could be modeled that easy. And like I used to believe my mind is great.
Mhm.
Like it was a bit like it's super cool, super impressive, but also makes to question myself. Like, am I really thinking in this way? Is this really the way thoughts appear in my mind?
Yeah.
It's so interesting to live in 2023 and observe this real time, all the drama, all the lessons.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, your last chance to add more questions. We still have 2 minutes left. And while you are using this chance or not using this chance, just a reminder that please keep donating and keep learning. This is why we are here. Okay. Lots of thank yous, of course. Yeah, it's really valuable for us, Sophie, because we know like how busy you are. And this is also like prime time for meetings with San Francisco. So we appreciate it so much.
Thanks for engaging with questions. I feel like I'm always a bit nervous that there won't be like active discussion, but the questions were great. And please reach out if anybody has any more, or maybe we could just create like an open doc for upskilling if folks want to gather some information or like reading materials.
Yeah, we will share reading materials with you guys. And thank you for spending time with us today.
Great.